I used to convince myself that I was imagining the way my mother-in-law, Pamela, treated me. I kept brushing off the uneasy feeling in my chest, telling myself I was being dramatic, too sensitive, or just unfamiliar with how families operated. But as the days slipped by, the truth became harder to deny. Pamela's comments stung more than before. Her gestures carried a sharper edge, and her icy glare followed me from room to room. Whenever I finally gathered enough courage to tell my husband, Steve, he dismissed everything as if I were inventing a fantasy. According to him, Pamela wasn't mistreating me. She was teaching me, molding me into what he thought a proper daughter-in-law should be. Worst of all, he accused me of enjoying the role of the victim. The first time I told him Pamela had thrown away the meal I spent hours preparing, he actually laughed like it was some joke I hadn't caught. When she dropped a basket of freshly folded laundry on the floor on purpose, he called it discipline. In his mind, her cruelty was valuable guidance, something I should be grateful for. I remember staring at him, shocked, wondering how the man I married could defend something so blatantly wrong. My name is Laura. I'm 28 and work in an office at a pharmaceutical firm. Steve and I met in college, fell for each other quickly, and got married 3 years ago. Back then, everything felt warm and full of promise. But after graduation, both of my parents passed away. Being an only child, I was suddenly left with no family in the world. I thought I had no one, until Steve brought me into his home. At first, Pamela and Steve's father embraced me lovingly, treating me like a daughter. When I moved in with them after losing my parents, I genuinely believed I had found another family to lean on. But the shift in Pamela's behavior happened gradually at first, and then all at once. After 3 years of marriage, and with us struggling to conceive, Pamela's attitude hardened into something cold and unyielding. She constantly reminded me that I was the youngest woman in the house, and therefore should handle the most exhausting chores. No matter how much I cooked, cleaned, scrubbed, or organized, she always found fault. She would intentionally smear dirt on clothes I had just washed or leave dishes half dirty, so she could accuse me of doing a poor job. When she ran out of chores to criticize, she turned to the topic that hurt the most: children. Month after month, she blamed me for not giving her a grandchild, as if I were deliberately withholding one. Feeling cornered, I returned to Steve repeatedly, hoping he would finally recognize what was happening. But every time he brushed off my words like they were nonsense. Pamela never mistreated me in his presence, and he refused to believe what she did when he wasn't around. His disbelief didn't just break me, it fueled her. She grew more confident, more open with her hostility. Eventually, she didn't even bother hiding it in front of him, because she knew he would always defend her. Then, in the middle of all this chaos, I found out I was pregnant. The news should have brought joy, but instead, a heavy weight settled in my chest. My morning sickness hit hard, and I stopped working earlier than planned. Being home only meant more time trapped with Pamela's constant torment. Every day felt like I was burning alive. Instead of supporting me, Steve began repeating her insults. The man who once spoke tenderly about our future now sneered that I was a woman who did nothing but eat and sleep. I knew stress could harm the baby, yet I felt like I was suffocating with no one left to turn to. Steve was my last hope, and even he felt beyond reach. Still, for the sake of the Lee. One quiet weekend afternoon, Steve lounged on the sofa, scrolling through his phone without a care in the world. I sat beside him, my chest tight, my throat filled with everything I'd been holding back for far too long. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice unsteady from fear and exhaustion. He barely glanced up at first, but when he finally did, I let every buried truth spill out. Every nasty remark, every humiliating moment, every time his mother cut me down while he stood by pretending not to notice. I told him how it was crushing me, how the stress was affecting the baby, how our home had become a place where I no longer felt safe. But his eyes stayed cold. His face didn't move, not even a flicker of concern. "You're exaggerating," he said, mocking me. "That's not mistreatment. My mom is showing you how a real daughter-in-law should behave. Why can't you accept that?" The words hit me like a blow. My vision blurred, and without thinking, my hand rested on my stomach where the baby shifted slowly beneath my palm. A truth I had been avoiding finally settled painfully inside me. This was no place to raise a child. If I stayed, my baby would grow up surrounded by the same bitterness and twisted thinking that Steve and his mother lived by. I couldn't let that happen. My voice trembled. I can't raise a child in this kind of environment. The way you and your mother think, it'll destroy our child. I'm done. I've reached my limit. Steve didn't even blink. He snorted, waving a hand dismissively. Then go. No one's stopping you. I froze. Pregnant with his child, and still he pushed me away as if I were a stranger. When I reminded him I was carrying his baby, he laughed, cold and low, telling me I had nowhere else to go anyway. That was the final crack. Something inside me shattered. With trembling hands, I went to the closet, grabbed a large bag and started packing. Steve watched with disbelief, and soon his mother appeared in the hallway, throwing her usual accusations at me, insisting everything was my fault for not obeying her ridiculous household rules. I ignored them both. My mind was made up. I told them I wouldn't be back and that once I had a safe place I'd send divorce papers. Their laughter followed me as I walked out, but I didn't turn around. I chose my child. I chose freedom. The next year was difficult. Lonely, tiring, and full of challenges, but also calm in a way I had forgotten life could be. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl and learned how to navigate motherhood step by step. I sent the divorce papers just as I'd promised. Steve didn't contest anything, but he also didn't pay a single cent to support his child. I knew eventually I'd have to take legal action, but for now survival came first. Today, hoping to lift my spirits, I stopped in front of a tall building with a glowing sign announcing that a model unit was open for viewing. Since I planned to return to work soon, I needed a home near my office and a daycare center. After months of saving, I finally had enough to consider a small, safe condo for my daughter and me. After checking in at the reception, I was taken up to the top floor. When the elevator doors slid open, my breath caught in my throat. The employee assigned to guide me through the model room was Steve. We stared at each other in stunned silence. He looked different, cleaner, more polished. He had apparently switched careers and now worked for a finance company partnered with the property developers. His smile was stiff, his posture awkward, but he still motioned for me to follow him. His voice was polite, almost overly so, but I could feel him watching me carefully, trying to decipher why I was there, what my life had become without him. The condo was stunning, perfect for a single mother. It had everything: close proximity to work, an indoor walkway leading directly to the daycare center, a quiet little park, and even a 24-hour grocery store. Despite the tension in the air, I knew this was exactly what I had been searching for. Standing there in that spotless, sunlit room, something inside me settled. No matter what happened next, I was choosing a future where my daughter would grow up safe, cherished, and far away from the people who had once tried to crush me. My decision seemed to catch Steve off guard. I told him I was ready to sign immediately if everything checked out. But instead of reaching for the contract, he hesitated. His lips trembled slightly, and his expression shifted, conflicted, uncertain, almost accusing. I waited, unsure of what he was about to say, the air thick with everything unspoken between us. There was disbelief in his voice as he scoffed, insisting that a single mother in the middle of a divorce had no business touring the penthouse level of a luxury high-rise. He clearly suspected I'd caught the attention of some rich man or was doing something shady for money. I stepped back, startled by how confidently he assumed the worst, and told him he was wrong. I explained that after leaving my in-laws' home, I moved back into the house my late parents left me, far too big for just me and my child. Before my baby was born, someone had shown interest in buying it. Even so, I made it clear that a normal sale would never have covered the cost of the penthouse. Steve's doubt came from the house's age and outdated state, but despite all that, the buyer, a wealthy man obsessed with rare water garden landscaping, paid 5 times what the property was worth. My father's old garden project had fascinated him so much that he insisted on buying the entire place, and the deal even included a monthly allowance so I could live comfortably while raising my child. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about money. As I spoke, something flickered in Steve's eyes. His attitude softened, and he muttered an apology, then extended his hand with an overly confident smile, as if assuming I'd just accept and move on. I didn't take it. I told him plainly that I didn't need a man who looked down on me, and that I could raise my child and live a good life on my own. The change in his face was immediate: shock, then anger. He glared at me, so focused on me that he didn't even notice a coworker entering the room with a stack of contracts. When I glanced past him to acknowledge the coworker, Steve kept ranting, completely unaware of how pale the other man had gone. He started snapping about how a woman living alone was bound to fail, and tossing out comments that were both insulting and outdated. I held up a hand to stop the coworker from stepping in and looked Steve straight in the eyes. I asked if he was finished. His voice rose again, accusing me of thinking I was better than him now that I had a fancy place from my husband's money. I turned away from him and addressed the employee holding the documents, telling him I was no longer comfortable buying anything from a company that kept people like Steve in customer-facing roles. That got the boss's attention. He hurried over, stumbling over his own apology, nearly dropping the papers in his panic. He nudged Steve sharply, forcing him to apologize as well. Steve swallowed hard and muttered a shaky apology, clearly realizing he had gone too far, and that the situation was slipping out of his control. Regardless of how much I liked the apartment, I wasn't about to hand my hard-earned money to a business that tolerated such behavior. I left without another word, walked straight to the elevator, and didn't bother looking back as the doors closed. Later, I heard from Pamela that Steve hadn't only lost the contract for the penthouse, he'd also been demoted and had his pay cut because of the incident. Eventually, he quit. Things didn't improve for him afterward. He struggled with drinking, gambling, and long periods of unemployment, all while Pamela tried to support him. The last time I ran into her at the supermarket, she looked exhausted. She told me she regretted everything, then practically begged me to return to Steve and rebuild a family with him. I calmly told her that if her home life was unbearable, she needed to leave it instead of clinging to me for a solution. Her face fell, but I felt a strange sense of closure. I eventually found another apartment, quiet, bright, and untouched by any of that old drama. I went back to work because I loved what I did, not because I needed the money. With my child in daycare and a promotion under my belt, life finally felt steady again, a balance of career, peace, and motherhood that I built entirely on my own.